Yeah, normally Chris, oh, we have a recording going. Okay.
Yep.
We can always edit that if we want to take the beginning part out. But now people can get in. But the thing is, they can get in before that anyway. This is just, I think, the recording. So I think I will pause it. Because we've had people sitting waiting for us to come in from backstage before.
Now, are
So,
you going to put captions on?
uh, we haven't in the past, especially because they're in English, but so I think I'll leave them off. Uh,
Because
you
some
want them on?
people, well, yeah, because some people who aren't, that's not their native language, they can't
Right.
understand.
Okay. So we'll see, Bella, and we'll see if we get people for this one because it's the one where, where we had a good, I wasn't there for it, but the article discussion one went really well too.
Good.
The author had questions for the group and this and that, so it was a good one. But this one is asking people to give us feedback, so we'll see if people attend or not.
Okie
But
dokie.
yeah, I'll feel a little bad that I wasted your time if nobody comes, but
Oh, don't feel bad about that. This is part of my gig, man.
mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll see. Oh, hold on, we have 8 participants.
There you go.
Why are they not here? Why do I not see them? Uh, Backstage. Can you see them?
I see attendees. I think you have to add them. Let me see if I can do that.
Oh, I
Says
see.
allow to talk.
Mm,
Yep,
Um,
I can do that. Talking
okay,
permitted.
here we go.
All right, I'm adding them all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they've all muted.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes and then we're going to get going with our session. Unfortunately, this platform does not allow us to see people. Um, these people are from my library, some of them. So that's kind of interesting. Yay. Um, so it does not allow us to see people. We can only hear you when you unmute. There's also a chat if you would like to use that. We're at 10:02. Well, we can get going if you want to get going, Bella.
Sure. Do you want
Okay.
to give your talk first?
Yeah, I just want to welcome everybody here today. I'm coming from the University of Calgary, which is on Treaty 7 land and is also home to the Métis districts of 5 and 6. We welcome you here today, and we have with us the president of the Statistics and Evaluation section for the International Federation of Library Associations, and that is Bella Gerlich. So I will turn it over to her.
Thank you. So welcome to today's session. I'm Bella Gerlich. I'm the Dean of Libraries at Missouri University of Science Technology. And I wish I was president, but I'm actually the chair of the Statistics and Evaluation section. So welcome. So first, let me talk about our section. Our members are interested in assessment, statistical data, value, impact, and so on, and all that these things mean for libraries. The notions of impact and value has been reoccurring themes in particular for both public and academic libraries in recent years. Our sessions at congresses and satellite meetings have discussed these issues, as well as other topics and tools. As statistics and evaluation methodology are forever evolving, we work to develop and present online workshops at all levels for professionals in the field. Whether you're new to gathering statistics or looking for alternative ways to do some of your work, or explaining data after years of service. And maybe you just want to know about current trends. These are the things that we're all kind of interested in presenting. If you're interested in looking at things we've already done, I would invite you to see past workshops and presentations at our section's IFLA website under the resources link. For today's focus on impact session, what we would really like to do is hear from you about what might be some topics you would like us to explore further. Your comments, questions, or success stories you have had can help to get us to develop programs and sessions in the future, just like this one. So I'd like to take it away and ask for you all to kind of discuss some things that you've done that worked for you, or some things that you might like to hear us talk about at future sessions, or if you have any questions, anything at all. I'm going to open the floor.
And I'll just mention that I have put the URL for our page for the statistics and evaluation section page into chat so that people can find that. So Bella is asking not only what would you like to see for programming from us, but in what format perhaps. And because for this series, we've done an article discussion where we got the author to talk about a form of impact, data storytelling. We've also done panel presentations and oh, I see someone has just asked me if I put it in for everyone. Thank you. I just put it in for hosts and panelists, so that's not very helpful. Let me do that again. We have a session next week, which is going to be a very interesting one, which looks at a global survey of the future of libraries. And they interviewed people, librarians and library staff from 77 different countries. So we're also interested in what kind of impact you feel you want to learn more about. Are you interested in qualitative, storytelling, how to make your stories sing, or are you interested more in quantitative metrics and how to do those? So please put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, or if you have a story to tell us about what went well or didn't go well, and want some suggestions, we can open that up for a dialogue too. And we hope that you will give your opinions and thoughts as we hear from people. Or you can tell us what brought you to this session today.
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, what were you hoping to get from it? Oh, and Mary Jo has joined us.
Hi, everyone.
Maybe people could tell us what your role is at your institution, if it has to do with statistics and evaluation, or if you're just interested in this topic.
Why don't we start with Bronwyn? Bronwyn, would you like to unmute and tell us? Or do I have to give you permission to unmute? Let me just see here.
I think you have to give permission, Justine.
Okay. Bronwyn, you can
Able
unmute.
to
We've given everybody permission. Okay, Bronwyn, I think you're on.
Thank you. I work as quality assurance librarian at University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. One of my responsibilities is looking after some our statistics for our library, but also I'm involved with various other quality assurance activities. Thank you.
And is there anything that has caused you a certain amount that you really wish you could do better?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Regarding our statistics, we have made progress with them. Working with my colleague, we have recently developed a dashboard, but we have recently collaborated with some of our colleagues from another university in South Africa. And yes, statistics, we certainly need to work on further benchmarking with our statistics. There is work being done. I'm aware the Chelsea library statistics database is being revamped. I've recently been asked to come on board with that. But yeah, there's still lots we could be doing and sharing and collaborating more on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bronwyn. And I will just mention that we're very sorry we can't see you all. One of the things about the IFLA Zoom webinars is that they only allow the moderator and the speakers to be shown, and we asked for that to be changed, and we were told that is not possible. So we are very, very sorry about that. However, I also want to mention that we do have another member of our executive here for the Statistics and Evaluation Committee, and that is Mary Jo Romanek. She is the secretary for the committee, and unfortunately we cannot give her, I'm going to try and give her host status so that we can see her, but Mary Jo, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Mary Jo Romanek. I'm the Vice Provost of Libraries and Cultural Resources at the University of Calgary in Canada. I, like Bella, have been on this committee. She and I have worked together and for a number of years trying to, I think, sorry, I'm getting popped.
Well, she'll be back in a second. All right, so thank you, Bronwyn. Next we have Chu. Do you want to tell us, Chu, what brings you in today?
Hey, so I'm from the University of Calgary, Library and Cultural Resources. Yeah, so I'm just kind of new to my role. Like, I have been collecting statistics for a while. I'm just interested to see what trends in library statistic, quantitative, qualitative. Yeah, just here to listen. Thanks.
So yeah, we do more with what are the big surveys, the trends going on in RL, Carl, and other national places, what's coming down the pipe for them or what they're focusing on. That's a good suggestion, Chu. Karen, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, I'm Karen Parker. I'm collection assessment librarian at the University of North Texas. I've been doing this for a while, and statistics in general, but also e-resource usage statistics. And I've been we've been collecting data for quite a while, and we've got a lot of data, but we haven't been very good at and we use it for collection development decisions, but we haven't done enough of the public facing. We had a few Tableau public things for a while, but we never really organized it. And so we're moving to Power BI because we're not going to get Tableau Professional. And so we're trying to find that balance of storytelling and visualization, but, also for what purposes, and I'm really interested in hearing success stories of the use of these kinds of dashboards, reports, and things like that beyond just getting it up there. And so that's where I'm interested. And as well as international, I've worked with a number of students and other people in different parts of the world. So I'm interested in collaborations as well.
So if I do, either Mary Jo or Bella want to talk to that, because I think your question is, how do we evaluate the impact of our dashboards? Is that what you were getting at, Karen?
Yes. And I very much thank you, Bronwyn, for sharing your link. Power BI has a problem with links. They're long. So, but it's really good to see another Power BI and for sharing. So thank you.
Mary Jo, Bella, do you have a comment on that?
I think if you're asking about communicating your results and the best way to do it and how to get people engaged, whether they're at the really detailed level, so different staff that might need to use it, or more publicly, your community, meaning, I guess community could be different things to different kinds of libraries, but academic community could be external to the library, but within the university or beyond. I think we haven't done a lot of work on it. I know that some of the organizations and some of the presenters, I think, Justin, you were part of that. We've had a couple presentations on data visualization and how to make it work now. And so I think there have been some on that, and we probably could, if there's interest in that piece, resurrect that as an area of focus, communicating your value and communicating your if that's what you're asking, but that's something that this unit could do again.
Do you know
Absolutely.
go on, Bella, sorry.
I was going to say, absolutely. Telling stories using dashboards that can be very effective. And I think one of the things that I noticed just from my experience too, is because we use dashboards using a tool that we have. And if you're a library that has been in, here's an issue I have, I'll just tell you. If you're a library that had been in a decline for a while, I mean, those statistics and those dashboards can be kind of disheartening. So the question is, do you display those, or do you just start to display when you start to go back up again, which is what we're kind of experienced. So how do you tell the story? Because even though we've had this decline of resources and so on and so forth for over the years, when we do surveys with our clientele and our users, they're all overwhelmingly positive. There's never any negativity, just very high satisfaction in those types of things. So I guess a part of it can be what is it that you want to convey, and how you convey that so that it is not looking like you're not doing anything, but then how do you mix in, and that's the part of the storytelling. So here's what the users and everything have to say about the service that we're kind of providing. So as Mary Jo mentioned, we did do a program on that, but that can be resurrected. And if it's not already on our website, I will have that put up again, and so that people can have access to it. But it should be noted that I think that we can maybe have another program about another workshop about doing that in real time.
Yeah, that one was quite technical, so maybe we could do another. And also, you bring up a good point, Bella. Maybe this story is you need more funding, and so you're telling that story through your stats. I'll also mention that our last session before this was a community of practice session with research librarians in Australia and New Zealand, and they have, between the two countries, 59 research libraries, and they have 53 or 56, I can't remember now, of the libraries signing up for this community of practice. And what we could look at is a topic such as dashboards, and just run a session where people come and talk about dashboards and their experiences, what they've learned, best practices.
And Karen, you mentioned that you were interested in collaboration at international levels. Are you a member of IFLA?
Not yet, but I'm looking into it. So especially like one of our student workers, call a student, he was professional doctoral, but he works for the National Library of Indonesia. So he went back home to Indonesia, and so it's one of the areas. Plus, I have a couple of people that I've worked on and off with in Namibia. I always want to make sure I get the right country. And so I'd like to think about how usage data and library data, the kinds of data that's of interest is going to be different, I presume, between different institutions and different environments of funding of, you know, what of activity and that sort of thing, academic activity. So,
Well, I'll just mention to you that if the actual cost to join IFLA as a member is not that expensive.
right. So yeah, it's not something I had earlier thought of, but these programs are useful. Thank you.
Mhm.
And you might have an institutional membership. You should check that out and see if you do.
Yeah, it's quite possible.
Next, Rihanna, would you like to say anything? Or Rihanna? Yeah, Rihanna. You don't have to. Just let us know. All right, I'll ask, and I'm very bad with pronouncing
They're
names.
muted. They're muted
Oh.
again.
Sorry, Rihanna. There we go. Go ahead, Rihanna.
I
All
think
right.
she said she didn't want to speak.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. No, thank you. Thank you. I see that now, Rihanna. There's no pressure. I'm very bad with names, but Kaluleko. Would you like to say anything? Anything you want to add?
He says, okay, no, thank you.
Okay. And what about you, Lords? Anything?
Unmute. Can you hear me, Justine?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm just going to share a little bit of why this session appealed to me. At the University of Calgary, I work at the Public Service Unit. I'm one of the information specialists, and we do collect statistics using one of the SpringShare tools, which is LibAnswers. So we do have this incredible statistics of patron usage, what the nature of the questions that we get through our chat service. I think what I want to really get out of this, as Bella mentioned earlier, is the impact of this statistics, what this means to us as a team, and how do we use that to improve services or get student and faculty engagement within our university. Thanks.
Well, I might be able to help you a bit with that, but I also think that are others struggling with showing impact from the statistics that they have?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so maybe we need to do a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I think as a team, we could really benefit from, I don't know, within all our units at the University of Calgary Library, for example, how each unit and the kinds of services are going to collectively impact our users more effectively and more engaging is what I'm thinking.
I think it's often easier, and Mary Jo and Bella can chime in, if you build it into your program as the program is starting, but we're often in the place where the program has already started or the service, and we have to backfill and try and figure out some impact value. Do others have experience with that? If you do, just put up your hand and I will unmute you. Joan, did you put up your hand or did you have something you want to say?
I didn't unmute, but I can say something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm new in this environment, but I work as the information literacy librarian. So I felt this session would be important to me as I learn about what people do this side, because I worked elsewhere from a different part of the world. So I'm here to learn.
Thank you.
I've collected data before, but about the usage of our research desk, and just to help me improve and strategize on how better we can offer our research support services to our students and faculty. I work at Texas A&M International University. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there are there programming in particular that you would like to see from us from this section? And perhaps how would you like it delivered?
Maybe online. I'll still be good to attend the online sessions or tutorials. I can read what you have done. Yeah, because I am from Kenya, and I realized that we have different working maybe practices. But yes, because I was in the teaching line, so I came as a library faculty late last year. So I'm doing a few months. I'm a few months old. Yeah, and I'll be glad to learn a lot.
I'm just going to jump in and say one thing, that it's a learning, but also a sharing opportunity in this committee. And Justine's organized a number of these sessions, and you'll see that we have participants from really global participants from around the world. But the one thing that we could use more of, I think, are people from the African countries and from the other than, you know, Europe, Australia, North America. It would be interesting to get more input. We have some, but it would be great to have more. So think about that opportunity as we go forward too.
Thank you.
Lourdes had mentioned that she would like to see more shared stories or narratives, success stories. And I'm wondering, do people prefer to share them within a community of practice, or would asking people to write up a quick one-page shared story for our website be something of interest?
Or would a session, we have a person here that's actually an expert coach in storytelling on staff, and she's spoke at IFLA before and at a couple other places. Would a session on storytelling and creating the story be helpful to people?
Yeah, that would be great.
So yeah, we have a few people saying that that would be really great, a coach to help us with our storytelling.
Yes, yes. My PhD research was on, if I can say something,
Yes.
on tacit knowledge management, and out of the data I collected, storytelling came out as a strategy that we can use to share knowledge. And yes, I'm interested in that.
Bronwyn also thinks that a storytelling session would be great. Picking up on Mary Jo's great idea, is there anything else that you would like to be coached on? Okay. Oh, Karen, I'm just going to unmute you. Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So you were asking about being coached, and that takes a few minute to think about it. But I think an issue we have is, okay, so my little unit is really the only, even though we're focused on collections, we don't have a library assessment coordinator person. And we have a small committee. No, it's not small. It's a big committee now. And we have a lot of people interested in it, in assessment. And we've even done the committee has done a pulse on assessment of library staff. and there is general interest, but getting people to do things and, you know, conduct assessments on their own, it's sort of like they're kind of sort of expected to, but they don't. And, you know, it's a lot of time. So I guess doing library assessment in an informal, I mean, we do the surveys, you know, that, I mean, let me rephrase that. We participate in the national surveys. We put up a PDF of facts about the library. It's just a report. It's nothing that we've done. For a while there, we were putting out more narrative reports. We haven't done that in several years. And that sort of thing. So getting people involved, I guess that's an area that would be useful for my circumstances, and I don't know about others.
Bella or Mary Jo, do you want to respond? What I heard is that you're interested in making the case for assessment, and also assessment on the fly, I think is what I heard.
Well, assessment actually following through on the interest. We got a lot of people a lot of staff who have an interest, but that tends to be as far as they go, because I think in part because of time issues. Mm-hmm. Everybody has too much to do. But you know, it's also sort of daunting for them. So I think I really like the community of practice that actually also in that same week, I attended a separate thing on a technical community of practice for Power BI in higher ed. And so having those two at the same time, same week, really got me thinking more about community of practice. So having more demonstrations of that would be useful. If not actually creating a community of practice, but, you know, talking about it more and that sort of thing.
Justine, I was going to add one more comment there, and I don't know if it's something that this committee, beyond the community of practice, that this committee could facilitate. I think that we talk about this, I sit on other statistics committees a lot too, that organizations collect a lot of statistics, and Calgary, as Lourdes pointed out, we collect a lot of things. I think, and it goes back to Karen's question, should people do more informal assessment? I think people don't do it also because they don't know how it's going to be used. It's a lot of work collecting a whole bunch of stuff, and some of it truly is stuff. We're going through a process in Canada at the national level, looking at how much of that stuff we collect is actually used to make decisions and useful to make decisions, because we collect things that really aren't as important. They're not a decision-making factor. So I think people need to know how those statistics might show a story or prove a point, or if they're going to be used in the decision process, or if they actually assist anything, if they actually influence anything. Are they useful? And I think that's part of it as well, is I think that people don't necessarily do things because they're not exactly sure how it's going to be used. Is it going to be used punitively? Is it going to be used to tell a story? Is it just going to be shelved and it's a lot of work that nobody pays any attention to? So maybe we can think about something around that, or have at least further conversations, or maybe some programming, if that makes sense.
Deciding what to collect and then showing its value. Karen, did you have another question?
Oh, sorry, I should have lowered my hand. I do have another topic of interest, but I'm going to put it in the chat and see what others say.
Oh, go ahead and say it.
Well, it's mainly connecting library usage data at the student level with student outcomes. So that, and working with your institution's data governance, and something I'm trying to initiate, because we have a very active data analytics, but we may be in a little trouble, not trouble, but things are getting more centralized at the system level versus the university. So we're a little concerned that access may not be there as easily. But anyhow, I'm interested to find out how best to do that, how best to approach other library staff regarding that, because there's a lot of, I don't want to do this. I don't want to poke into my students' GPAs. I don't want to know that, and I think this is private and dealing with the privacy issues. I think we have the technology to keep the data private. It's just more of a matter of librarians feeling concerned about violating that privacy, not releasing it, but violating the trust.
So
Well,
ethical assessment, but Bella, go on.
I was going to say, there's a number of tools that are being used on campus that, in the advising area and the student success area where people can refer students to particular other areas where they might need help, like the writing center, or the writing and communication center. And so I think that one of the first steps we can do is to get our foot in the door in terms of being a resource that when students are at the Student Success Center and they need help with something, there's a library link there to a person. And so that those students are being referred to librarians, or that librarians can contact those students. And we can begin to show some engagement in that way, and saying that you actually had a way to help a student in those terms. So you can record those kind of activities as well. And I know there is that piece that we don't want to kind of break a trust, if you will, if somebody's coming and asking you for help. But I think it's important that we somehow figure out a way to record these type of activities so that we can demonstrate impact at that level. And, part of that can be done with just by recording those research areas that you do when you talk to a person who's there with you to do research and so on and so forth. And you can begin to record those statistics, but we have to actually describe what those kind of activities are. And so that people know it's not just a one-off. That's why I don't like the hash mark when we talk about recording statistics as far as answering questions or things like that. So how to quantify that or qualify that and write things up about it without breaking that trust is important. So, but I think that deserves looking into, and maybe talking about how we can do that. Because on this campus, there's, we've got this whole list of how are we supporting all these different strategies at the university level, and to be able to insert yourself in those goals and say, this is how that what we do impacts that goal is key.
Thank you.
And I love the idea of, I think sometimes our statistics aren't very accurate because it takes too much time and people are fallible and they don't make the tick or do the things they want. And I'd love to know some tools that would automate some of that. Something that maybe once a month would tell me how many minutes I spent in Zoom for student consults if I just tagged it, or things that would just be easier. So I'd love to know some of the technologies that are coming down the pipe that would make assessment easier. And I'd also love to know what we should start collecting now, because it'll be important in 5 years, like AI things. How are we going to capture that? But I'm not sure what others think. If there's other things that people want to see us discuss.
Do you use the Reed scale in your when you record when you've helped a person?
No, but I should. And I've
You
read about it.
should.
And I read about it quite a bit, so I should. Why don't you tell people about that in case they're not using it?
Okay,
Ella.
so the READ scale stands for Reference Effort Assessment Data. And what that does is it's a six-point sliding scale. And 1 is your where's the bathroom question. 3 is going to be your ready reference. And 6 is like for those research help questions that might take, they could take more than one session with a person, they could stretch out over time and so on. But you can look it up on the internet. There's a website, but the value behind it is instead of putting a tick mark down for when you've had a consult with a person, is you put a number in there. And each one of those has a rough approximation of how much time might be spent. So at the end of a month, you could say, oh, I did 5 4s, and that's about however many minutes, so however many hours I spent working on doing research. And so that kind of tells a story. It really qualifies the consultation as opposed to just putting down a tick mark for what you do. So that's what that is.
And that'd be the kind of thing that would be great for a community of practice, I think, for us to talk about that more. I'd also love to see something personally on how we look at our strategic plans at the institutions we work with and adjust our assessments to reflect what is the universities or colleges or public libraries or national libraries priorities, so that we could somehow adjust what we're doing to make sure that we're always keeping our assessment practices or what we're collecting in line with what the university or our institution is interested in. Anybody have any other ideas that they would be interested in seeing us pursue? If there are no other comments, we can wrap it up now. But if anybody has any other comments, just let us know. Raise your hand and I will unmute you, or put it in the chat. All right. So for those of you who are not a member of our statistics and evaluation group, which I think there's a few of you here who aren't, we encourage you to look at joining our committee. Bella and Mary Jo, did you have any final words that you want to say?
I think it's been a very interesting discussion today, and we came away with a lot of good ideas, and it's nice to know that there are some people out there that are really using Power BI to do some of this data. So possibly we might reach out to you to see if you would be interested in sharing your expertise in one of our sessions coming up down the road. So, and please, if you need anything from any of us, just reach out via email, easy to find.
Mary Jo?
You know, I would just echo Bella. I know sometimes it's not easy to navigate and find out what's happening in IFLA because these committees are elected people and we try to make our content known widely, but and quite often your institution could have a membership and doesn't mean that they're on the small committee, but it just means that somebody gets an email about things that you might not know about. So I encourage all of you to keep coming out, and new faces are great. And there's lots of opportunity both to share what you know and to learn from others.
You know, and as you said, Power BI, Bella, I also thought it'd be interesting to have a session on free or open access tools that you can use for assessment. That would be interesting as well. For those of you in attendance today, I hope you'll come back next week because we have a great session with Dr. Lynn Conway, who is the vice president of research for OCLC, and she and a bunch of people in researchers at OCLC did a global survey on the future of libraries, and that's all types of libraries, where they interviewed librarians, library staff, different people from over 77 countries. And we really hope you come out for that session next week. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justine, for putting these together.
Thank you, Justine.
No problem. I'm sorry we didn't have all the attendance we hoped for today, but we had over, I think, about 50 people sign up, but this has been pretty typical. 100 people sign up, 20 come. So that seems to be the way we're doing it. But
That's